Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I call Nicaragua the land of lakes and volcanoes because it's full of both of them. And you'll see that as we go along. My trip was in December of 2016, a couple weeks before Christmas. And I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Joy Underhill, and I like to travel, and I like to take pictures. So that's enough intro for me. Okay, I have to introduce Bonnie because Bonnie was really the reason I went to Nicaragua. Bonnie is an expat from San Diego, and she's, at the time, in 2016, she'd lived in Nicaragua for 9 years. She had actually a truck, which was quite handy. She was fluent in Spanish, and she knew the culture very well. She was well integrated with the culture. And for years, she'd been saying, oh, come down to Nicaragua. And I'm like, putting it off. But finally, I said, well, why not? And what was great about being with Bonnie was, of course, she knew where to go. She knew how to get around. She understood the culture. You know, she was a great host. And she gave me a much more intimate view of Nicaragua and its people than a tour might have done. So I was very grateful to Bonnie for giving me this opportunity. I'm not sure, you know, if I would have gone to Nicaragua on my own had she not provided me with all those benefits. So I'm indebted to her. I don't think she lives there anymore because they've been having some political problems, but I think now she's moved to Mexico. But, you know, here's a scene, you know, this is very typical in around beaches, that you just hang out in hammocks and, you know, she's looking at her iPad there, or you have a drink, and it's pretty relaxed. Okay, a little bit about the geography of Nicaragua. It's situated, you can see in the lower left, it's really right in the middle of Central America. It's the biggest country in Central America, and it borders Honduras to the north and Costa Rica to the south. We primarily, you can see in the bigger map, Managua is close to where I have circled Masaya and Granada. And Managua is where you fly into. But Bonnie lived in a coastal tourist community called San Juan del Sur, which is down close to the Costa Rican coastline. And Nicaragua is quite different in terms of, you know, on the right side of this map is the Caribbean Sea, and on the left is the Pacific Ocean. And particularly when you get to the Caribbean side, it's quite wild over there in places. There's unexplored jungle, and it's, you know, as I was saying earlier when we were chatting before, it's, you know, you can go in there, but you're on your own. There aren't roads. And who knows what you're going to find in there, including all kinds of animals. So I've circled here the primary places where we went, and you can see there, just to give you an idea of distances, San Juan del Sur, the main road that comes out of there goes to Rivas, just to the north, and that's probably about a half an hour drive. So that gives you some idea of distances. I had to fly into Mexico City and change planes. And on the way out, I got this wonderful shot of the volcano near Mexico City, which is, maybe you know how to pronounce this, but it's Popocatépetl or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it is an active volcano just outside of Mexico City. What was that?
Outside Mexico. He doesn't know.
Yeah. I looked it up, and that's the one.
It's not an easy name.
Right. So I'm going to start in San Juan del Sur. This was really our home base. Bonnie had a home that she bought there. Prices were, and I'm assuming still are, for the most part, ridiculously low. She had a nice 2-bedroom house. This was her porch, and that's the Pacific way out in the distance there, and that's her view, which is quite lovely. She lived in a community. There were several houses in there, and it was common in Nicaragua to have, they were gated and they had a guard. And the guard also would come by at night and just make sure that there's nothing going on in the properties and that sort of thing. And that was quite a common way that people lived in these small, really just residential areas. So we spent every morning here having breakfast or having drinks later at night. And it was really quite lovely, I have to say. All of the furniture she found locally. There's this one town that makes all this furniture, and it was interesting. I have to say though, you know, they don't have screens, they don't have air conditioning, and that wasn't a problem. You know, the mosquitoes were not a problem, but they do have some bugs. There were a couple of times when we came in and you'd see this little black thing, small little black thing scurry. It was a tarantula. Okay, so, which they're not really that dangerous, but the scorpions are. And I didn't see any.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, she has a couple cats to hopefully take care of the scorpions. So here's a picture of San Juan del Sur's beach at sunset. Very first thing we did when I got in, you know, pretty much when, you know, it got later in the day, was we went there and we sat on the beach and we had cocktails and hors d'oeuvres and just watched the sunset, and it was gorgeous. And this mural to the left, I was taken with it because it kind of depicts something that I was not able to see, but there is a nearby reserve that's protected, where the turtles come and they lay their eggs, and then the babies emerge, and you know, they make that hazardous run to the water. But you can go there and see them come out at night. They usually give you like a red flashlight so you can see, but you don't disturb them. So something I missed, but it's not far from San Juan del Sur. I did a lot of street photography when I was there because I found it fascinating, and you know, both the people and the places. And these are, so I'm going to show you just a few typical street scenes. To the bottom left here, I was just kind of entertained because this is like how they would wash a bus, is with a rag and a bucket. Quite laborious, but and there is a program where they bring, I guess they're used school buses from the United States, and then they use them for public transportation there. And you can see they retrofit them with all kinds of racks and things for luggage or chicken carts or, you know, crates or whatever they happen to have. And the one thing was, in the school buses, we'd be following them sometimes, and they didn't disable the stop signs that come out, you know, and the flashing lights in the back. So, you know, Bonnie would just buzz by in the truck, and I was like, oh, we're not supposed to. But then I realized, no, this is a public bus. But it startled me a few times. And to the right, this is, again, a very typical street scene. I was just taken with how everything seems to be built on top of everything else. And there's a lot of busyness, a lot of different vehicles, and the telephone, the electrical wires are just a maze, you know, just unbelievable. Yeah. And very colorful, though. They like to paint things bright colors, and you see it everywhere, which I thought was really nice. Here's some more street scenes. To the left, this is a man who sells, you know, just like touristy type stuff, bags and some clothing. He was giving me a thumbs up in there, you know, but I was just kind of taken with the brightness of the
yeah, very colorful.
Yeah. I mean, even the curb, it's worn, but you know, it's a bright yellow. And to the right, you know, again, this is just somebody's front porch, probably a fairly well-off person, I'm going to say. And you know, the San Juan del Sur is really they do a very busy tourist trade, and a lot of young people will go there when they're visiting Nicaragua. There's a lot to do at night. There's live music. They have their Sunday fun days, which is, you know, just a big a big party in a pool generally. And they have hostels and stuff to accommodate the young people as well. So San Juan del Sur has one church. This is a Catholic country. And it changes color almost every year. They didn't actually, Bonnie said the people weren't too fond of this tangerine color, but I thought it was great. I think it's so colorful and bright. And this was a statue inside, and you can see it's a very, it almost looks like Mexico to me, in terms of the influence. Here's some beach images. There was this young man selling these balloons, and he was kind of lost in them, balloons and blow up things. And then this is another view of the beach, kind of from the side. You might be able to see on that upper picture way to the right that there looks to be a big statue up there. And that is a big statue up there, which you're going to see in a little bit. But it's a very large Christ statue up there. And this is a harbor town. I mean, there's fishing, there's all kinds of water sports. It's really quite nice. I was taken with the doorways too, because again, the colors, that they chose were just so brilliant. Even if they were worn, there was a lot of texture and it was interesting. And you'll see dancers perform on the street, like this woman is near the beach when cruise ships come in. They do come in, they might stay for a day or a few hours generally. And, when they're coming, there's all kinds of vendors that come out, that put up temporary booths to take advantage of their business. Now this looks like a Spanish or Mexican dancer, which is one type, but then there's also a more of a local type dance. And then there's also a Caribbean type dance that they do. So, and each of them have different costumes. It was very interesting. One evening on Thursday nights at one bar, they used to have this dance troupe come, and they would change clothes in between and show the different styles. And again, very colorful, very lively. So this is actually on the driveway up to Bonnie's house. And we encountered these people, and I just said, gotta take a picture. I'm guessing this is a family. And this is a poor country, and you can kind of see a lot of it here, right in this picture. The little boy, he's barefoot, and he has a very thin horse that he's leading. And you see this everywhere, this contrast. And Nicaragua is the poorest country in Central America, and actually is second only to Haiti in poverty in the Western Hemisphere. So it's, you see this a lot. Some places the sanitation is just abhorrent. Sometimes you would see open, just landfills that you just knew were very hazardous to human health. But consequently, it's very inexpensive to visit here and to live here. So, it's kind of a mixed bag. Currently, nobody's traveling because of COVID, and that has begun to hit more in Central and South America. And I believe it was about a year ago, but maybe it was 2 now, that they had some pretty serious civil unrest, particularly in the city of Managua. It had to do with, as I understand it, taking away basically retirement income. And it got very much out of hand. And that was about the time that my friend Bonnie said, I'm out of here. So, she always kind of had a plan for if she had to leave in a hurry, what she was going to do. So, and as far, people will ask about crime, and there is crime. Most of it is opportunist type crime. It's not like people have a lot of guns like they do in the United States. But you do have to watch your personal belongings pretty carefully. There'll be cute little boys who come up to you on the beach, and one will distract you and the other might take your bag. So you just have to be smart about it. When I was there, the biggest thing was taking out my big camera with the big lens, because the minute I did that, I could feel eyes on me. And, Bonnie said, you're holding a year's salary for somebody here. And so I tried to be as discreet as I could, but it's kind of hard. So, and also, as I mentioned earlier, you kind of have to be smart about this stuff, but also learning Spanish and learning a little bit about the culture does help a lot, because a lot of people don't speak any English. And I would have been handicapped had I been on my own, for sure. So I mentioned that big Christ figure. Well, this is the big Christ figure from up on top, and now you can see the entire beach area. It's really quite nice. It's just a big horseshoe there. This Christ of the Mercy looks like it should be something like really old, but it was built in 2009. And there was a man, I think the story goes, he had some sort of an illness, and felt that if he built this big statue that he would be cured, and he actually was cured. So it worked. This is a bit of a climb. You can drive part way, and we actually talked somebody, well, Bonnie talked somebody into letting us drive the whole way, but most people have to walk uphill a bit to get to this, but it's a fantastic view. And there's a lot of these big Christ statues in South America and Central America. This is not uncommon. Here's some more street scenes, kind of just showing, again, believe it or not, what we would see as poverty to the left is pretty much middle-class living there. That's pretty much what it is. And to the right, I was just taken with, the purple bike and the yellow wall and the orange sign. And then, even though you can see there's infrastructure problems here, she's got a cell phone. And you see that everywhere, all the young people. You have to be very, very poor not to have a cell phone here.
Somebody's joining.
Okay.
Somebody's joining the video.
All right. I can't see anybody. I'm just talking to my own screen. So
It says there's a Veronica.
hello, Veronica. Hopefully she'll be able to join and not have any problems. Okay, so again, this is San Juan del Sur. This is close to San Juan del Sur. It's a little bit north. And some of these beaches are beautiful and they're absolutely empty. And this was one of them. It's really unspoiled beauty along the coastline here. We did have an incident here. We were, well, the girl who's kind of dancing in the water there was our model. And I was taking pictures because we had this idea that we might sell some of those handbags, leather handbags in the United States. So she was kind of modeling. So she's out playing in the water, and I've got my camera, and we've got all our purses and stuff on the beach. And we were warned about this, that sometimes people watch people on the beach, and they'll come out of the hills if they see that you've left your stuff unattended. And that did happen to us. We saw two men coming down, and we just made a beeline for our stuff, and they just kind of veered away. They didn't come close, but they were trying. So a little unnerving. Veronica, were you able to get in? She might be on mute.
Yeah, she's on mute.
Okay,
And
that's fine.
And I don't have a picture, just a name.
Okay, that's fine. I took more pictures of people here because I really found the Nicaraguan people beautiful. These are two sisters just along, the street wearing their fancy headbands there. And you can't see it too well, but they were using this highlighter to paint their nails. One of them has little yellow nails there, and that's what they were using for their for beautification. These are some market scenes in San Juan del Sur, very typical. the woman to the right, you know, she's selling vegetables, all kinds of tropical fruit, very fresh, all of it. And then the woman on the left is making, she's got a big pot that she's steamed food in, and it's called bajo. And bajo is, it's basically not good quality meat that's steamed with rice and beans in plantain leaves. And they just do it over a big pot. I did try it. It's considered kind of poor people food because it will fill you up, but it's not high quality food. And it was not my favorite. Let's put it that way. They eat a lot of plantains. We had them everywhere as their starch. Some more street scenes. Again, kind of a study in contrast with the brightly colored but worn doorways on the left. And then on the right, there's a gorgeous resort called Pelican Eyes that overlooks San Juan del Sur. They had a beautiful infinity pool, and we were there during Christmas, so you can see the chandeliers kind of done for Christmas. But, you know, this is the kind of thing you run into, is these big contrasts. These are some of the fishermen. The guy on the left is actually in the fish market. It's the place that you're going to go to get your fresh fish. He was very proud of his catch. And then these boys to the right had done spearfishing. And I think they came up with a fluke. I think that might be what that is. Is that a halibut? I'm not sure. That the little boy is holding, but they were quite proud of their fish, and they posed for me. So. San Juan del Sur, at the time that I was there, had just had a general election, and Daniel Ortega went back into power. He had been in power many years ago. You probably heard of him when there were other troubles with Nicaragua. But he had a lot of these political posters up still about, you know, this is loving Nicaragua and that kind of thing. And so I just took a picture. My friend told me too that it was not popular that he was back in power, because the first thing he did was to appoint his wife as the VP and then abolish term limits. So that didn't go over too well. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of political unrest. I think it was a year ago, but it might have been two, and it's still not resolved. The other picture here is a man named Eddie, who I met at a party and also at a bar, a friend of of Bonnie's, and he did fire dancing, which is a popular form of entertainment there. He had an interesting story, and a pretty sad story actually. He's from El Salvador, and he makes jewelry. And El Salvador has a real problem with gangs, and he had a family there, but the gangs were they kept on trying to coerce him to join the gangs, and he didn't want to. And he actually had some scars on his body in one place where he was shot in his arm, and he had some scars on his back from when he was beaten by the gangs because he didn't want to join them. And that's actually why he doesn't take off his shirt when he does fire dancing. So he decided he had to move without his family for his own safety to Nicaragua. So at the time I was there, he was about to make a trip back to see his family and was pretty nervous about going back to El Salvador. So you hear about these gangs, but then you hear the story of somebody, and it takes on more significance. Here's more people from San Juan del Sur. The guys at the top right, they were the surf shop guys. That's what they did. And I was stunned, but people in Nicaragua have very good teeth. We were talking about the water earlier, but they have good teeth for the most part. And then this woman, she went around every single day pushing that cart selling fruit. And again, very colorful. And here's a couple. they just posed for pictures. I was so, there was something about them that struck me. I especially was struck by her purple glasses and then her hat, which actually says Hedonism 3, which is some resort someplace, but it was like, it was just funny. I mean, they have no idea what hedonism means. So they were very, I learned how to ask to take pictures, and people were actually, I think everybody let me take their picture. This is, again, close to San Juan del Sur. On the left is, and you see this, you see places that were either resorts or, this was on the beach, so I'm pretty sure this was a resort area. And they just, after they fail, they just kind of go into neglect. It's a poor country. So, and on the right, this was the San Juan del Sur Cemetery. And I made Bonnie stop. I said, I have to take a picture of this because it was so colorful. And, the families would actually paint all of the gravestones here the same color. So, you can see in the background kind of there's the purple family back there and a blue family and this white family in green. And then they would decorate the graves with these plastic pom-pom, sometimes just, in crosses or wreaths or whatever. But it was so colorful. I just kind of couldn't get over it. So much different than cemeteries here. This upper picture was just along the roadside. We stopped here for fruit. There's all kinds of roadside, you can get most anything along the roadside. We found most of the main roads were good, but the back roads could be really full of potholes and rocks and really a nightmare, especially if it rained. There's no screens generally, and the doors are always open. You always see the doors open like this. We did see a lot of, and this was a concern actually, a lot of animals wandering along the roadside. And either they were lost or they were grazing, and sometimes there'd be a child, with them, but it would be horses or cows. And, she said sometimes it can be danger because people hit them with cars. But that was just odd because I said, well, who do these animals belong to? And she says, well, some of them are lost and some of them someone is hurting them. And on the bottom is a Jesus statue. It was a full life-size Jesus laying in the San Juan del Sur church there, and quite dramatic, actually. And I mentioned Rivas, which is the closest city of any size to San Juan del Sur. San Juan del Sur is like a big town, I would say. I wouldn't even call it a city. But Rivas is definitely a city, and it's the place you go to buy stuff that you can't get in San Juan del Sur, to do any kind of big shopping. And again, a lot of street vendors. These were all these shoes set up here that were very colorful, a lot of open air markets. Polly was Walmart in Latin America. And this was one of the very few signs of westernization that I saw in Nicaragua. I think I saw this and maybe a KFC. And that was it for 2 weeks. I mean, there were no McDonald's, no Subways. These international companies have not come in there. And I actually found that very refreshing to have it be non-westernized. And so this Polly had, if you go inside, it's exactly the same marketing as you'll see in a Walmart. The signs kind of look the same. They use Hispanic models, like babies on diaper packages and things like that. But everything's in green and white instead of blue and white. So it was interesting, and it was absolutely packed. It was wall-to-wall stuff. And we're just going along the road, stuck in traffic, and we come upon these two young men with their pigs. And again, this is something that's pretty common, that they'll take their livestock and just throw them in the back of a truck and take them wherever they're going to go. But, again, it's just not something you see here. And this is also in Rivas, or on the way to Rivas both. And they have a lot of these churches, and many of them are, again, very colorful, but not in the best repair sometimes. And, you know, again, these telephone lines, or electric lines all over the place. And then this family to the right, they were selling honey along the roadside. And I actually bought some and brought home. And they were selling them in old beer bottles that they put wax caps on top of. And they were just cute. Masaya is a little further north from Rivas, but it's again, it's a community. I'd say it's a small city, big town, not a big place. But we went to the market, and that was one of the more interesting places we visited. There's a couple big things in Masaya. One is a market and one's a volcano, and we did both. So when you walk into the Masaya Market, the first thing you see are all these cobblers. And this was a young boy. He was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and he was fixing shoes by hand. Some of the older cobblers had really old Singer sewing machines that they were using. But, you know, rather than buy new shoes, they will repair them. So this was interesting to see. You can see there's an older cobbler there, and he's got, you know, very traditional cobbler tools, and, you know, his stand there, you know, is very simple. And the woman is holding one shoe, and I'm thinking this is probably a toddler. It's a little tiny shoe that he's repairing for her. And then this is what the market looked like when you're in it. Just stuff everywhere. A lot of leather goods in very bright colors, hammocks, spices, just anything you could, pinatas, you know, just all kind. It was just a feast for the eyes, this market. And of course, if you want to buy anything, you bargain. It's really common in almost everywhere but the United States. And then the Masaya Volcano, you may have recently heard about this, because I think it was in April, Nick Wallenda he tight-roped across the Masaya Volcano in Nicaragua. And having been there, I know how far this is. I mean, this is a big hole in the ground. This, you know, it took them some time to do it. And Masaya is also it's an active volcano. Not only is the steam coming up all the time, but you look down there, and if you get the right angle, you can see lava down there. So they were letting people in when we were there, but they were thinking they were going to close it in about 2 weeks to visitors because it was just too active. So, you know, we were kind of warned, well, when you get up to the top, turn your car around so that if you have to leave in a hurry, you don't have to turn around.
Yeah.
And they said, and stay like 10 minutes because this gas is really it's not very good to breathe in. And what was interesting was we weren't there at the right time of day, but there are literally hundreds of green parrots that make their homes in the walls here, in holes in the walls, and then they fly out at dusk. And I don't know how they deal with these gases, but they do it somehow. So. And Masaya sometimes is open to view at night, which is, you know, it's quite startling because it's red. But because it was active, they weren't doing the night viewings when I was there. And again, here's another version of a volcano on the bottom. This is what happens with a dormant volcano. When it gets filled in, it becomes a lake. And this is called Apoyo Lagoon. And this was a beautiful, beautiful area. We went right down to the water and went swimming. And it was thermally warm from the volcano. So it was very comfortable, very soft water. And it was mostly sandy, but then there were these little rocks, and they were pumice rocks. So you literally could, like, you know, get rid of the calluses on your feet in soft water, and it was warm, and it was really quite beautiful and quite natural. And then we had lunch there, and this was a fish that it's actually got pretty big teeth, but that was taken right from the lake, and it was absolutely delicious. I mean, the way that they did it with the plantains underneath, and of course there was a very curious parrot, you know, wanting any leftovers. And a little further north yet, we kind of did a loop, is Granada. And that's a good sized city. It's with a huge Spanish influence. You can see it. This would be like visiting Spain, right? And it was more affluent, you could tell. And, you know, here's where you can see one of those artificial Christmas trees that they lit up at night in the square there. And what struck me too was, you know, the doorways and the way the streets were structured, which I'll talk about in a minute. So Granada is really known for those beautiful red tiled roofs, which if you get up high enough, you can see them, and they're all over the place. And then this is just a street scene again, you know, just very colorful. Everything is painted bright colors, and a bougainvillea. I think it's a bougainvillea. So one place that we went was a chocolate museum, and inside this museum, there's courtyards that are open air, and they grew cacao trees for the beans, and these beans grow right off the main trunks and branches. It was bizarre how they grew, but that's what they look like. And they had all kinds of interesting chocolate products. They had a chocolate tea that I brought home, and you know, just different things. And then this man, again, he kind of posed for me, but he was a municipal worker of some sort. I don't know whether he was giving out, you know, parking tickets or what he was doing, but he obviously has some sort of a problem with his legs, but he fashioned this, I guess you'd call it a wheelchair bike or something, that he would navigate with his hands. And, you know, it was very clever the way he cobbled this together, I thought. And, you know, you see that kind of ingenuity in Nicaragua because they just don't have any money. This is a hotel we stayed in Granada, which was absolutely gorgeous. It was called the San Francisco Hotel. And, you know, they had this beautiful inner courtyard, again, kind of private, but then once you got inside, it was all open air. In fact, there was a turtle that lived here, and there was a garden area, and he just kind of would wander around. You saw him all the time. And then a little bit of food here. This was breakfast, believe it or not, very hearty breakfast. And it's a little hard to see, but there's a little pyramid sort of behind the flowers, and that's a real staple of Nicaragua called pinto gallo, which is basically beans and rice. But they served it with almost everything. And the food was good in Nicaragua. It was very fresh. I won't say it was like creative, but it was hearty, and it was really fine, except for that street food. That bajo was not fine, but otherwise it was okay. So in this chocolate museum, they also had an art gallery there. So I just took some pictures of some of the art. You can see these masks to the right, which are, I think, quite creative, quite interesting. Yeah. And then this beautiful piece of art, I think, to the left. I just, again, I love all the colors and the vibrancy of it, and all the food. You know, it's just a lot to look at. And then I did take a lot of pictures of doorways in Granada because they were so beautiful. I mean, again, brightly colored. You can see they've got a star out for Christmas, but very private. You know, you'd be walking down the street and many of the doors would be shut and you can't see at all into the houses. But if they were open, you could see back to these inner courtyards, like at the San Francisco Hotel there, and it would just be beautiful. I mean, you know, they have a garden back there, and it was open air, and so it was an interesting style because it felt very closed from the street, but then you knew these places were gorgeous on the inside. So this is this is a resort actually behind the Chocolate Museum. It also had a resort area where you could stay. And in the center of where that big church was, the big yellow church, they had a lot of creches. This was a common thing to see at Christmas time, and some of them were quite large. And this is a creche that's lit up at night. And I think it's Isletas de Granada. That's actually an area not far from Granada. Maybe it's on the water. So it's probably about 20 minutes or half an hour. We got lost, so we took a little longer, but it's not far from the city itself. And this is like our Thousand Islands. I think they have over 300 islands there, but it's just this little archipelago of islands. Some of them have big houses, like where they own the whole island. Like I think this one on the bottom might be just one house, and the person owns the whole island. And other ones are uninhabited. Some of them have cemeteries on them. That's what's on the island. So you just kind of tour around on a boat and kind of learn about them and go in and out. It's very interesting. And there's this one island called Monkey Island, which used to have all these spider monkeys they were very friendly. They would come right down to shore, and if you had a banana or a plantain, they wouldn't quite take it from your hand, but if you threw it on the shore, they'd come down and you could see them. But for some reason, they all got sick and died, and now they have these howler monkeys that have done the same thing. And I think this guy, I think something happened to his tail. Their tails are longer than that, so. But he was pretty happy. He got his banana. And there was actually a pregnant one that was in the trees that we could see while we were there too. And this was actually in that area. There's kind of a channel that you go through to get out to the islands. And as it turns out, really, the poorest people live close to the water, which I found interesting. But they have so much shoreline, and this is a lake area. This is fresh water. So perhaps that's why. But this was about the poorest housing I saw, was down on the lower shot. And in this area, I didn't get a very good shot of it, but there were young men who would wade out into the water with nets to catch tilapia. And that was their livelihood. That's what they did. And you just see them right up to their necks with their nets. This guy has a boat, and he's fishing as well. There, you would see things, and I wish I had been maybe a little more courageous in taking some pictures. One time there was some women washing clothes it looked like, it had rained, and so there was water, maybe, like a half an inch deep, not real deep, just going over the road and filling this kind of basin to the right. And they were just in there washing their clothes. But again, you're in a truck and you don't stop for everything. So, of course, there's beautiful flowers and all kinds of interesting botanicals in Nicaragua, being in the tropics. This in Bonnie's backyard, just growing wild. And this other blossom here is actually papaya blossom. And you can kind of see the fruit starting to come out of that. It was quite small, maybe the size of a large marble at that point, but papayas grow all over Nicaragua. And here's some other things that I just took shots of. The piece of artwork down below is actually, that's cashew. And cashews, I couldn't take any pictures because it was the wrong season for them. But how they grow, it's really interesting. They call it a cashew apple, and it's a little smaller than an apple. And then a single cashew grows out of the bottom of it. And when they turn pink, or red, that's the time when they're ripe. And you can actually eat those apples. Those are good to eat. But the cashew really needs, it's a very hard nut to get to the inside of it. And it's also poisonous. The oils and the outside of it are poisonous, so they have to treat this pretty heavily, to make it so it doesn't poison us. You know what I mean? And I just, when I saw like how much goes into a single cashew, I had more respect for eating cashews, I guess, because there's this whole apple that supports the cashew itself. Ometepe Island is located in Lake Nicaragua, which is a big lake in the middle of Nicaragua. It's freshwater. And the way that it was formed, you can see in kind of a map of it in the upper right, was two volcanoes came up out of the water, and then they kind of merged together. So Ometepe is this figure 8 island that is essentially two volcanoes. The area I was looking up is about the size of San Francisco, so pretty good size, and it's quite wild there. And by that I mean you can see where the roads are in that map. There's kind of a ring road and then a partial road that goes along, and that's it. If you want to get up high into that volcano, you just are hiking through jungle. And we thought about it for about 2 seconds, because it takes about 12 hours round trip to climb up there, and you get very muddy and it's a rough climb to get up there. But typically what you do, this is what we did, was you hire a driver for a day, very reasonable, like $25, and they'll just stay with you and take you wherever you want to go around the island. And a lot of people do use scooters too. That's pretty popular there. So you need to take a ferry to get out here. Ferry probably takes about 45 minutes to get out here. And they don't do it in bad weather. And in fact, we might have been on the last ferry, because it was pretty bad weather when we were out there. It was windy and somewhat rainy. It was stormy. And they won't take the ferries out there, because they're afraid you're going to get stuck out there, basically, not be able to get back. So here's some interior shots. Again, you don't see the tops of the volcanoes because the weather was bad, but it's very wild here, very agricultural. They grow a lot of bananas here, and there are all these around the beaches. It's all like black volcanic sand, which was very interesting. So this was the resort where we stayed, and it was like something like $35 a night for 2 people. It was very reasonable. We were just there for one night. And one place we went was this Ojo de Agua, which is it's like a little lagoon. It's I guess you'd call it a swimming hole, but it's fancier than a swimming hole. And it's right in the jungle. But it was raining that day when we were there, so this is actually quite turquoise colored water, but the day that we had it didn't really look that way. And it's just a little resort spot. We had these Coco Locos, which is basically they take coconuts and hack off the top of them with a machete and then pour in rum. And so it's rum and coconut juice. And they had free refills, so we lingered a bit. And then this woman, she was selling like sweet pastries, and we bought some from her and just talked to her for a bit. And she was a native of Ometepe, and she said this is what she did for a living. And she asked us, if we were going to finish our meal. We had, some leftover food, and we just gave it to her because, that likely could have been her dinner too. So. But she remembers, we were asking her, because, living on an island or 2 islands, a place where it's 2 volcanoes, you can't get off in a hurry. You know what I mean? Like, if she was nervous about living right on a volcano. And she said no, because she kind of just thought that was in the Lord's hands. And she said she does remember about 70 years ago, they had an eruption, and it was okay. They weren't hurt, but they did have an issue there, and there's nowhere for these people to go. these are kind of interesting pictures. The man on the right, we were just, you know, like I said, we had a driver, and we were coming into this little crossroads, and there was a family sitting there with a huge pile of corn that they were shelling, hard corn. And so we stopped and just asked if we could take some pictures. So he was sitting there, and, you know, he had amazing hands. His hands, it's hard to see them in this picture, but, you know, they let us take pictures, and he's got a Lakers hat on, which kind of made me laugh because he probably has no idea what that is. And then this vessel to the left, when we were there, my friend Bonnie had an artist friend, and he had a resort there, but he also had a studio. So we visited with him for a while, and he had lived there for a long time. And he had an extensive garden, and sometimes he'd happen upon these very old relics, and this is one of them. This is about 4,000 years old, they estimate. They have these in museums, and those lines, like, that almost look like the word dough, that's actually a family name that they would use. This is a funerary piece, and typically what they would do was, you know, they would, I mean, I don't know how, but they would wait until somebody's basically bones were clean after they died, and then they would take the bones and put them in this and bury the whole thing. So, you know, I asked him, I said, well, were there bones in this when you found it? And he said there were, so they buried those respectfully. But, you know, and this thing was probably about the size of a large stock pot, I'm going to say. It was pretty good size. So it's very interesting. Just more street scenes from Ometepe. This is near the port on the left. Again, they're moving a cow. So this is how you move a cow in Nicaragua. Or a calf, probably. It looks pretty small. And then this is a man outside a church, and I was just kind of taken with his expression and the very large cross right behind him. Again, people were very friendly about letting me take pictures. And on Ometepe Island, I was talking about this before we started the program. There was this man, his name, let me see. He ran a place called Hacienda Merida, which is, it's kind of like it's like ecotourism. There are nature-centric activities. There's a small restaurant and a small hotel. They do things like kayaking and horseback riding. And back in 2007, the owner, whose name is Alvaro Molina, he noticed there was a problem on Ometepe Island. Because it's remote, they were, you know, Nicaraguans were using it as a place to dump their junk. And there was an awful lot of plastic, especially plastic bottles. So I'm not sure if he invented this or if he found out about it, but he decided to get rid of the garbage problem and also construct buildings at the same time. So what he did was he offered people $1, which is actually a lot of money in Nicaragua, if they would bring him plastic bottles and fill them with like clean garbage, for example, not wet garbage, like papers, you know, dry garbage. And then when he got enough, he would actually create, you can see this is a mold here of a table. So they lay these bottles down, and then they pour cement in there and then release it. And then you have a very stable structure. So they made some play structures and tables and chairs. And they actually have a bilingual school that they built out of all these bottles. And you can see it there. I mean, just all these bottles, and it's quite strong. And they use rebar with it, just like you would with regular cement blocks. But cement blocks, trying to bring them to a place like Ometepe Island would be very labor intensive and expensive and extremely heavy as well. So this is a great solution for, you know, a very poor country. Okay, so that's what I have. And I just want to let you know that I am going to be doing another travelogue on England in about 3 weeks. If you go to the library website, you'll see the sign up for it. but we spent 2 weeks there too, and that's a lot different than Nicaragua, so you might want to check it out. So, and well, I'll just explain this one on the right. You know, again, I love these doorways because they have so much texture and color. But the woman on the right was in one of the markets, and she had this. She was very proud of this device. It's kind of two pieces. You can't see it from the picture, but it was to flatten plantains for frying, because they kind of would flatten them into, oh, I don't know, like bigger than a silver dollar size and fry them. And this made that process easier. So she was very proud of this.